Welcome, everyone. I am so excited for this session, handling the high stress parent, mostly because I am a high stress parent and I trust Jody so much about this topic that I invited my own children's teachers to watch so they could help handle me better. But I am delighted to welcome Miss Jody Blanco to the stage. She is, if you don't know her name already, which you probably do, she is a New York Times bestselling author. She's published multiple books for the NCEA. She is an in-demand speaker in both Catholic schools and public schools, and really the creator of the anti-bullying movement and an advocate and a survivor. So I'm going to stop talking because she has much more powerful things to say. Jody, thank you so much for being here today.
Andrea, thank you for welcoming me. I'm blushing from all the kind things that you said. Thank you. And hello, everybody. I am so honored to be with you today. And I want you to know that even though we may be separated by the digital divide, I am with you in spirit and with my whole heart. So I want you to know that. And I want you to know that I can feel the energy of every single one of you as I'm looking into the camera lens. And I hope that I can give you information that not only will empower you in how you deal with parents, but will be practical and applicable right away and very easy to put into practice. So before we begin, for those of you who don't know me, I'll give you a quick little thumbnail sketch. I am 56 and almost 4/4 years old. I will be 57 in about a week. And from 5th grade through high school, I was the kid that no one wanted to be caught dead hanging out with. I cried myself to sleep because I didn't fit in for the same reason so many kids today don't, simply for being different. I never imagined that I'd write books or that it would become a life's mission to embark on an anti-bullying crusade, but that's exactly what I've done. And one of the most interesting things that I've discovered along the way is that, we talk about bullying among students, but there are so many principals and so many teachers and superintendents and educators in general who struggle with dealing with parents who are either bullying or high management or just so stressed out that they create stress around them, and particularly with their child's school. So how do you deal with that parent? How do you deal with a parent who might otherwise be very calm and reasonable and easy to deal with, and then suddenly they're under enormous stress and someone you barely recognizes comes out? How do you deal with that parent? How do you navigate forward in a way that strengthens and deepens your relationship with that parent and that parent's confidence, faith, and trust in the school? How do you transform a tense, bordering on miserable situation with a parent and make it something that's enriching for everyone involved? How do you do it? First of all, when a parent is unreasonable, irrational, when they're condescending or they adapt that imperious tone and they're making you feel this big and they're triggering every defense mechanism that you have, stop, process, and breathe. Know this: imperiousness, rage, anger, condescending behavior, obnoxiousness, all of those behaviors are secondary emotions. Fear is the primary emotion. The reason that a parent becomes so angry and so aggressive is because they're afraid. They feel a lack of control. And the less control they feel, the more afraid they become. And the more afraid they become, the more they try to wrest control using behaviors that actually have the opposite effect. If you can remember that parent who's getting on your very last nerve and who's making you feel like you're going to lose your temper or become unhinged yourself, if you can remember that it's fear motivating that parent, it's a game changer. So here's your first homework assignment. I love giving educators homework assignments. Gosh, that's fun. Here's your first homework assignment. When you have a quiet moment this weekend, I'd like you to think about a specific incident in your life, could be any age, when you were really scared because you felt a complete lack of control. Perhaps something was wrong with one of your children, or perhaps you were a child and it was a situation that was terrifying you. But a very specific moment in which the fear that you felt in that moment, if you think about it, you can almost feel it again. I want you to isolate that moment, and that's going to be what we call your sense memory. It's a way to connect with an emotion when you need it in a particular moment. So the next time that a parent is unreasonable or irrational, I want you to take a quiet moment to yourself before you interact with this parent. I want you to close your eyes and I want you to think about this moment when you were afraid and reconnect to that fear just long enough, just a beat, just long enough that you can identify with that parent's fear. When you interact with that parent, whether it's by phone, Zoom, or in person, the tone of your voice will be different, your body language will be different, everything will be different, and it will go a long way in diffusing potential volatility. That's number one. Secondly, with COVID, we struggled with certain types of parents before COVID. The helicopter parent, the executive parent, the parent who thought that because they're paying a Catholic school a tuition, that automatically the principal and the teachers are employees of the parent, and we would struggle with navigating those parents. After COVID, these issues became even more trying. When we went to remote learning, it taxed probably every relationship with every parent, with every school. First of all, take a moment to congratulate yourselves, because it's 1 year today, actually, that the whole COVID reality at least really hit me, with schools going remote and cancellations. It's a year and we survived. And I'm betting that all of you survived with grace and confidence. And I think that moving forward, we can learn great lessons from what we experienced. Number one, there's a difference between authority and emotional credibility in communication. When you're communicating with a parent, particularly a parent in a stressful situation, either they're struggling with their child academically, or their child is being bullied, or perhaps we're thrown into another period of disruption with distance learning or hybrid learning, whatever the circumstance may be. If you're dealing with a parent or a group of parents in a stressful situation, there's a difference between authority and emotional credibility over the situation, because let's say you're an administrator or a teacher. Emotional credibility is different. Emotional credibility is when someone trusts you and feels safe with you because you keep your word. Now, these tenets of emotional credibility and communication work well with students. They'll work well with your significant other. They work well in any circumstance. But for the purposes of today, we're going to focus them on applying them with the stressed out or stress-making parent. Tenet number one, specificity. The more specific you are when you communicate with someone, the more validated they feel. The more general you are when you communicate with them, the more dismissed they feel. That's why if you ask any kid, what's the one thing that adults always say to you that drives you the most crazy? Virtually every child will look at you and say, well, when something's really important to me and the grown-up says, we'll see. Because that child knows that that is just a grown-up putting them off because they don't want to be bothered or they don't want to commit to anything right now. The adult variation of we'll see, the same response elicited in adults is I'll get back to you. Now, I know and you know that if you're dealing with a stressed out, irate parent, When you tell that parent, I'll get back to you, you're not trying to dismiss them. You're not trying to wiggle out of dealing with them in the moment. In most cases, you're trying to be responsible. In your mind, you're thinking, I need to process this. I need to get more details. So I need to be respectful, and I'll get back to them when I have more information. That's how you're thinking of it. But through the prism of that other person, they see it, they internalize it as you're hoarding all the power. You have all the power. You're going to get back to them. You're going to call the shot of when this is dealt with, when you're going to answer their questions, when you're going to talk to them. So a far better approach is to use specificity as your benevolent weapon. For example, if that parent calls and they're unruly or needing to vent, as long as they're not being profoundly offensive, give them a moment to vent, even if it's just a moment. And then say to that parent, thank you so much for feeling comfortable enough with me to be that open and honest. Your concern is a priority for me, and I want to be able to fully focus when we communicate. When is a good time for you to meet with me, either in person or via Zoom, so that I can really give this the attention it deserves? So you're not making any promises. You're giving yourself the same wiggle room as I'll get back to you in terms of answering any questions or committing to anything, but you're making that parent feel validated instead of dismissed because you were specific with them about, yes, this is a priority. You were specific with them about, yes, we need to meet to discuss this, and you brilliantly put the ball in their court about when they can meet with you. The best way to say that is, how soon can we meet? What's your schedule? And the funny thing about that, between you and me, is that if you have a parent who's demanding to meet with you immediately, and you say that to them, suddenly, in most cases, the parent's angst is completely diffused. Their animosity and their vitriol just melts away, and they'll be more reasonable and usually say, well, let me look at my schedule, maybe next week. So it's about making them feel heard and using specific language that reinforces it. Now, some of you are saying, well, if I'm in the middle of something, I can't drop everything, and I have some parents who are just high maintenance. Then just lead with truth and compassion. Be honest. When you get on that phone call, the parent might vent. Give them a second if you can and say, thank you so much. Thank them again and say, your concern is a priority for me, and I'm in the middle of something now that's distracting, and I don't want to be distracted when we communicate because this is so important to me. How soon can we meet? If you handle it that way, you're setting the stage for a much more productive dialogue moving forward. So that's specificity. Specificity. And we'll get more into these tenets when we talk about documentation. Tenet number 2 of emotional credibility, we've already touched on it, is immediacy. When you're dealing with a parent who's really upset, I know there's a part of you that probably thinks, oh, I want to give this parent a cooling off period. You'll say to yourself, I'll call them back, or I'll communicate with them in an hour or tomorrow when they've cooled off. That's a myth about human nature. That parent isn't going to cool off. They are going to fester. And the longer they fester, the larger whatever the issue is becomes in their psyche. Much better to deal with it immediately. And when you're dealing with something, even if all you do is give them a phone call and say, how soon can we meet? I can't address this right now, but how soon can we meet? Immediately reach out to that parent so they don't fester. Because once they start to fester, you lose compassion momentum. You want that parent to have compassion for you, just as you want to have compassion for them. And if a parent festers, it diminishes the compassion momentum, and compassion momentum is important. The third tenet of emotional credibility in communication, and my very favorite as a professional writer, is semantics and positioning. Simply put, present it the way you want it perceived. And I'm going to give you a quick little example of that to illustrate it. So let's say that I'm a principal and I need to call a parent because her daughter Brianna is getting bullied in math class. Now I'm going to act out two scenarios for you, scenario A and scenario B. And I want you to tell me, think it to me, or you can chat it to me. But I want you to tell me, scenario A or scenario B, which parent would you rather meet with? Oh, and by the way, I see in the chat box that someone asked about slides. The reason I don't do slides when I can avoid it is because I want a human connection with you. I want this to be as close to me being on a stage or in a room with you physically as possible. But what I will be doing after this session is on the weekend, I'll be sending Andrea a supplemental mini white paper that is all the highlights and notes from our time together as an added learning resource for you. So I just do it a little differently than other speakers. Okay, scenario A and scenario B. This is me talking to a mom. Hello, Mrs. Gutierrez. This is Jody, Brianna's principal. By the way, you have a remarkable daughter, and we are so blessed to have her in our school. I don't know if Brianna's mentioned anything to you, but she's been having some challenges with some of her other classmates, and we have come up with a really exciting plan of action that I can't wait to share with you. How soon can we meet? That's scenario A. Scenario B. Hello, Mrs. Gutierrez. This is Jody Blanco, Brianna's principal. I don't know if Brianna's mentioned anything to you, but she's been struggling with bullying in math class, and I'm really concerned, and I'm wondering when you can come in so we can discuss this problem. Now, which mom are you going to want to sit down with? The one from scenario A or the one from scenario B? Obviously, it's scenario A. Why? Because in scenario A, I calmed the parent using positioning and semantics. For example, the first thing that goes through a parent's head when they hear from school is, oh my gosh, what now? And their defenses go up. And bear in mind, everyone, especially during COVID, when parents are more stressed than ever about finances and career and logistics, they're under so much more stress than ever. Whatever was difficult for them before is exponentially more challenging now. And sometimes the root of a parent's offensiveness when they're dealing with a school administrator or a teacher is they feel inferior. You know, you're with their kid more waking hours of the day than they are, and they're not educators. They might be good at what they do for a living, but when it comes to education, it triggers their insecurity. Some parents had bad experiences with principals when they were kids, and that triggers a lot of subliminal insecurity as well. So in scenario A, the first thing I did was compliment the student, because that diminishes some of that parent's just natural kind of defensiveness. And if you can't think of anything complimentary to say about the student, make it up. It's a venial sin, and I promise you can go to confession and be forgiven for it. But compliment the child. Also in scenario A, notice I never use the word problem, because that's a word that makes people retreat. Instead, I use the word challenge, because that's a word that inspires proactiveness, proactivity, and positivity. When you hear the word challenge, it makes you want to rise to the challenge. But when you hear the word problem, it kind of makes us go like this. Additionally, I didn't use the word solution because solution is bad expectation management. And let's talk about that for a second. Everyone talks about classroom management when we're studying to become teachers, and it's an important part of learning how to be a teacher. But we all know that classroom management isn't learned in class or isn't learned in college when we're studying to be teachers. We learn it in the classroom. It's baptism by electrocution. Well, there's another kind of management far more important because it directly impacts parents, and that's called expectation management. You need to learn how to manage the expectations of your parents, because the better you can manage their expectations, the stronger the partnership will be between the two of you, and the more fluid and productive your communications on an ongoing basis. So in scenario A, okay, I was positive. I talked about a plan of action versus a solution, because a solution promises an outcome. It focuses on the outcome, where a plan of action focuses on what we're going to do together in partnership now towards a common goal. It's about the journey, not the destination. Also, you'll notice in scenario A, I never made that parent feel like, oh, she has to come and I'm dumping this problem on her. All she has to do is approve this wonderful plan of action that her daughter and I have already started working on. So she walks into that meeting feeling confident and secure and comfortable because I was specific with her. I was paid attention to my positioning and my semantics, and I used immediacy because I told her, how soon can we meet? Now let's look at scenario B. In scenario B, I never complimented the student, so that parent's already getting nervous and anxious and defensive. Also, I used the word problem. So now that parent's thinking, great, one more problem I've got to solve. So she's already resentful and secretly insecure. And also in scenario B, I left it up to the parent in a very sort of lackadaisical way. Well, when can you meet to discuss this problem versus how soon can we meet to discuss this wonderful plan of action? Same purpose, same phone call, same scenario, different semantics and positioning. So now that we understand that, let's talk about the steps of how to intervene with a stressed out parent while simultaneously reinforcing emotional credibility, as well as integrating in the documentational component and the expectation management component. First of all, let's review step one. If a parent calls or a parent is stressed out, if you can deal with it in the moment, even just to take the call, take the call. Use the technique we talked about earlier if you need to build yourself some time, but at least address it so they know they're an emotional priority because you dealt with it, at least connecting with them, even if it's brief, immediately. Number two, and I may lose count, I'll try to touch my fingers, I'm not good at math. Number two, when you do set up that meeting with that parent, be cognizant of your expectation management at the very get-go. When you set it up, whether it's Zoom or in person, discuss with the parent how long the meeting is going to be. How much time are you both going to allocate for the meeting so that you both have the same expectation on time? My rule of thumb is that 90 minutes is a good period of time to allocate. Most things don't take 90 minutes to navigate, but if it goes over 90 minutes, it just becomes sort of repetitive and cyclical. So better to do 90 minutes and then reconvene for a second meeting, and to know that up front. Also, on the day of the meeting, if it's in person, okay, if the meeting is in person, I know this sounds silly, but there are so many times where I've been in schools and parents have come in for meetings where I'm like a mediator because I consult with schools and I often mediate in difficult situations between parents and the school. And I can't tell you how many times I see the parents walk in and the front office personnel doesn't offer them a water or a coffee, doesn't make them comfortable in a conference room. They almost act as if their presence is an inconvenience. Usually because they've been so difficult and rude, the front office is just tired of them, but you still have to rise above. So you want to prepare your front office personnel on the etiquette of stressed out parent management, which means when they get there, we're so glad to see you. It's so good to see you. Can I get you a coffee or a water? Make sure that whatever space you're going to have the meeting in is comfortable, and there's notepads and pencils for the parents, because parents are often stressed when they come in. They may not think to take notes. They may not want to fiddle with their devices. It's nice to have a notepad and pencil there. It makes them feel valued, and it makes them feel equal. When you begin the meeting, start on the positive. Remember, tenant number 3, semantics and positioning. If I was there in person, I would bounce because I bounce for my tenants. So you have to imagine me bouncing 3 times. So when the parent walks in, lead the meeting with, I am so delighted you're here. Thank you for feeling so comfortable with me, to be as open and honest with me as you've been. And I hope that we can continue that today. I am so glad that you're here. And I want you to know that we share something deeply meaningful in common. We both love your child so much. So let's work together in partnership to navigate a plan of action together. Let's work together in partnership to navigate a plan of action together. Use the word partnership. One of the biggest complaints I get from parents is that they feel like the school has all the control, and that they're kind of cryptic when it comes to being forthcoming about specific information. So when you use the term partnership with a parent, subconsciously, it's making them feel more at ease. It's making them feel more connected to you. And the more control they feel that they have by being in partnership with you, the less stressed they'll be and the less difficult they'll be to work with, I promise. Now, once you've said that, then you say to the parent, may I have your blessing to take notes during our conversation, because it's so important to me that I not only get down everything accurately, but that I have it so that when I think about it and when I start to assimilate the information, it's accurate and represents honestly and truthfully what you've shared with me. May I take notes, because it's important that I understand what you're going to tell me. No parent's going to tell you no. Now, or very few. A tip on note taking. And some of you will probably bristle at this, but that's okay. It's just a suggestion. Take notes on paper with a pencil or a pen. I'll tell you why. Sometimes when someone is taking notes on like an iPad or a laptop or a smartphone, the person on the other side, in the back of their mind, wonders, are they really taking notes, or are they checking emails or sending texts? I know as a professional speaker, when I'm, giving a professional development to say 1,000 teachers in a gym, and I'll see all these teachers on their devices, in the back of my mind, I'm wondering, ooh, gee, I hope they're paying attention. I hope they're not, texting or grading papers. And I'll have these teachers come up to me and say, by the way, I want you to know I wasn't working or emailing. I really was paying attention. Well, in a situation with a stressed out parent, you don't want to have to say that to them. You want them to feel safe. Remember, emotional credibility is about safety and trust. So take notes on a notebook, or even if you have one of those notebooks that's digital, those are fabulous. But it will make the parent feel as if you're really paying attention. When you begin the conversation, you've already established that your priority is that you both have something in common. Then say to the parent, okay, talk to me, and then let them vent. A loving warning, all right? if this parent is really upset, particularly if it's because they feel that a teacher has been bullying their child, or if they've had an impasse with a teacher and they're afraid that you're going to be defensive of your faculty member, or if they're meeting with you and you're a teacher and they're so angry that they're just, because they've listened to what the student has said, who's maybe 10 years old, and they're already defensive and protective. And so they've walked into this meeting already feeling aggressive towards you. When you say, talk to me, some of that aggression may come out and they may trigger your defense mechanisms. Okay. I want you in that moment. Take a deep breath. And remember, before you walked into this meeting, what did we do? We took a few moments to sort of close our eyes and recall our sense memory of when we were afraid. So hopefully when you walked into that meeting, you already had that body language and that internal emotional sort of state of being that you understand and can empathize with their fear. It's an empathy exercise. But let's say this parent is being so impossible, it's worn off, okay? Gently recall that memory again, just for a beat, and tell yourself, this parent is afraid. Right now, what I'm getting from this parent is fear. This isn't personal, it's fear. And try to maintain your stillness and resist the urge to interrupt and defend yourself. This is going to be really hard because you are going to want to interrupt and say, that's ridiculous, that's not true. Let them vent. The best way to detonate a bomb is to defuse a bomb, I should say. The best way to defuse a bomb is to detonate it in a controlled environment. Just let that parent vent. Unless they're becoming profoundly abusive, then you can step in. And if they're becoming profoundly abusive, then you can step in and say, look, I care so much and this is such a priority for me, but I think I'm going to just walk out of the room for a few moments and get us some water so that we can both find our center. But engaging, if this parent is putting on your defensive and you start making a bunch of excuses, the more defensive you get, the more it will accelerate their frustration. And the more you accelerate the frustration, the worse this is going to get. Remember, in conversations, we have descension and ascension. The parent may, because some parents will do this, because we've all done it when we're upset, right? They will try to get you down to their level. They're angry. They want to argue, and they're going to try to bring you down there. They're going to try to make you descend. And the trick is that instead of letting them bring you down to their level of argument and angst, you want to elevate the conversation. You want to ascend and bring that parent with you. And the best way to elevate a conversation is to listen without interruption and let them vent. When they're done venting, and I know this is hard, but you can do it. When they're done venting, you again, thank you for feeling that comfortable with me to be that open and honest. Then, after you've done that, say, I've taken notes. Let's you and I work in partnership towards addressing this challenge together. Let's you and I work in partnership towards addressing this challenge together. Then you can get out your laptop or your iPad and say, okay, let's you and I come up with a 3-point plan of action on how we can make this situation better for your child, how we can address this challenge. And the first thing you're going to do is turn the problem statement into a challenge statement. So you'll say to the parent, okay, now I just want to paraphrase what the challenge is, because I want to make sure that you and I are both on the same page about what the challenge is. And then in a sentence or two, describe the challenge. This is critical. One of the biggest issues that comes up when you have a school and a parent at opposite ends of the spectrum on something is they start on a plan of action and everyone assumes that they're framing the challenge in the same way, but they're not. The parent may see the challenge in one way, and the school may see it as a completely different challenge, and they're not aligned. So it's really important from a communications perspective that you are specific. There we are, specificity again, that you are specific with each other about what the challenge is, so that you are aligned and on the same page from the get-go. Don't just assume that it's obvious. Say it. Be specific, okay? Now, turning a problem statement into a challenge statement is about semantics and positioning. Here's an example. A problem statement would be, my daughter has no one to sit with at lunch, nobody will sit with her, and she comes home crying every night. Turning that problem statement into a challenge statement would be, okay, our challenge statement is we need to come up with a 3-point plan of action on how to help your daughter find joy at lunchtime, to find her someplace where she would love to sit and is socially engaged, or an alternative activity during lunch where she can enjoy her lunch and have another activity that brings her fulfillment and joy. We need to make your daughter's lunch period joyous and fulfilling. That's our challenge. Do you see the difference? It's the same challenge. It's just you're presenting it, what we're going to do to address this versus the negativity of what the problem is. Once you've determined the challenge statement, read it, adjust the verbiage together so you're aligned. Then say, all right, now let you and I work in partnership on a 3-point plan of action on how we're going to address this challenge together. And then you come up with 3 action points, no more than a sentence or 2 each. Each action should be very direct and very simple. You know, action 1 might be, we're going to sit down with your daughter and ask her if there's something she would rather do while she's having her lunch that maybe isn't in the lunchroom. Maybe it's assisting in the library or assisting in one of the classrooms. Whatever the action is, you choose 3. 1, and you discuss it with the parent, type it up. 2, and then 3. Then at the end, after you have your 3 action points, now we talk about expectation management. And remember, you've read this and you've documented it, and documentation is very important. Then you say to the parent, thank you again for wanting to work in partnership with the school. Now let's talk about a follow-up strategy, because it's very important that we meet each other's expectations, because this is about your child and nothing is more important. So what is the best follow-up strategy for you? I'm going to take everything we've discussed and I'm going to send you an email with all of the specifics as we've discussed them. And I'd love for you to respond and let me know that you received it. And then work out a follow-up strategy. It might be that you email each other once a week on Friday with updates, because some of these actions might be yours. If it's a 3-point plan of action, you might have different tasks, each of you within those actions. So you're going to want to update each other. So maybe it's a once a week email, or an email every 2 weeks, and then a phone call every 3rd week, depending upon the severity of the challenge. You work out with the parent what's a realistic strategy for updates and follow-up, and then you have to stick to it. And then you have expectation management, and you say to the parent, okay, now let's talk about what happens if we don't meet each other's expectations. If one of us, is delayed on a response, is there an alternate number we can reach the other? I want to make sure that we are meeting and fulfilling each other's expectations. So that way you know what to expect. And you can work it into your schedule. And it doesn't have to be elaborate. It might just be every 2 weeks, you update each other in an email and you have a phone call once a month. And maintain the same email stream so that you have documentation that's chronological and specific, because some parents are litigious, and if anything ever does go that far, the diocese will be very grateful that you have such professional documentation. Now, let's talk about, real quickly, then I'll take questions. Let's talk about email and text messages and digital communication. I know sometimes that a parent will send an email that can be really aggressive or offensive, and you often wonder, should I just respond via email? No. Email and text messaging have no emotional context. So sometimes you can email something or text something and it's completely misinterpreted tonally because there is no tone to digital communication. So if you get an email from a parent, if you have that parent's phone number, pick up the phone and call. It's always going to be your best bet. If you don't have a phone number, then use the same tact with email that you do, that I suggested when the irate phone call comes in. Email them, and you can even template this email in your laptops so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. And just say in the email, dear so-and-so, dear Mrs. Gutierrez, I received your email. Thank you so much for feeling comfortable enough to be that open and honest with me. I'm grateful beyond words. We both have something tremendous in common. Your child is a priority for us. We have great love for your child. Your issue, your concerns are priority for me. How soon can we meet, either in person or via Zoom, to discuss this and come up with a plan of action together? Positive. How soon can we meet? And don't let the email sit in your in bin. And if you got to it late because you physically, humanly couldn't help it, apologize in the email. Say, dear Mrs. Gutierrez, thank them, and then apologize for it taking you a while to get back to them. Because that parent is afraid. They're feeling a lack of control, having something to do with their child. And their insecurities and their nerves are going to be on edge. So if you're kind to them and you're compassionate towards their fear, it will make them more compassionate towards you. And it's the same thing with text. And one last note, and then I'll take questions. I get a lot of questions about social media, when parents either are bullying each other online on social media, or when you have parent cliques and you'll have a group of parents who start bad-mouthing a teacher or saying nasty things about a teacher or an administrator on social media, and then they pull in the administrator, or a teacher gets pulled in the middle, or an administrator gets pulled in the middle. Okay, and I will include this in the supplemental mini white paper that I give you that corresponds to this session. And I have all the tips of how to handle that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way down the line. But the bottom line on that is don't engage publicly. Don't engage publicly. Don't post or respond publicly. If it's a parent or a group of parents, message them privately. Tell them that they are a priority, that you've seen that there have been some concerns verbalized on social media, and that they are that this is a priority for you. How soon may we meet to discuss this productively and work in partnership to come up with a plan of action? And message them. Don't defend yourself, because you're going to be tempted to defend yourself. Don't, because the more you defend yourself, the more you descend. The more you are aware of your positioning, immediacy, and specificity, and compassion and awareness of their fear, the more you elevate and ascend, and you bring them with you. Okay, and in conclusion, thank you. Thank you for listening. And Andrea, thank you for being my friend and entrusting me with something as important as Forefront's inaugural conference. And if any of you need me, whether you want me to come to your school to implement my program, or you just want a sounding board, you're having a situation with a parent and you just want someone objective to hear you out, please feel free to call me or email me. I will always give of my whole heart. So does anyone have any questions?
We did have a question that came up in the chat about email communications. They asked if they should BCC their administration or just keep them for documentation purposes. Did you have a recommendation?
Yes, what I think that BCCs can be a real problem. I'll tell you why. Because sometimes the person who receives the blind copy doesn't always register that it was a blind copy, and so it can create situations where somebody is saying something that you wish they wouldn't. I think blind copies can be problematic. My feeling is that if you want to share it with an administrator, if you're a teacher, first you should tell the administrator what's going on anyway, so they're fully in the loop. And instead of blind copying, I think the best idea is to forward it. And what you can say to the administrator is, here's the email I got. This is how I responded, so that the parent feels honored and respond the way I suggested. And this is how I'd like to handle it when this parent and I meet. What are your thoughts? And then, but do it as a forward versus a blind copy, because then if you forward the email, you can provide context. Whereas if it's just a blind copy, that administrator's not getting any context. And remember, communication is about dignified, compassionate control. And whenever we communicate, whether it's with a superior, a colleague, a parent, or even a student, we want to have context to our communication. We want to be able to set the stage so the other person understands what our purpose is, what the situation is, and what our intended and hoped for outcome is. Any other question?
Yes, I have a question. Handling parents is an evergreen topic. However, we've had a uniquely challenging year. So I know you work with hundreds of schools all the time. What have you seen as sort of new or different during the COVID crisis into what are the stressors of parents?
That's a great question. The biggest stressors of parents during the COVID crisis that I saw, and it's nice to sort of look at this because we don't want to throw away the baby with the bathwater. One of the biggest things I've seen with parents during COVID is when everybody switched to remote learning, parents were in a panic. And a lot of schools, a lot of dioceses were trying to educate their parents about how these platforms worked. And the parents' biggest complaint was there are too many platforms, too many things to learn. Can't you keep it simple? And so there was all of this bedlam that was going on. And I did a lot of boot camps for dioceses on how to sort of navigate this. And what we discovered is that the regular communication with parents, more regular than usual, gave them a comfort level, The other thing we determined, which was really interesting, is that a lot of what dioceses and even districts were doing is they were teaching the students how these platforms worked, and then they would teach the parents how the platforms worked in separate sessions, right? But what I suggested, and a lot of them started doing, is to do a family session. Do a session where you have the parents and the students together. You have the parent with the children, like a family Zoom session, where the students actually get to help the parents learn how the platform works. Kids love to teach their parents. So when you have the parent and the child learning the platform together, and the students says, see, mom, when I do this, this is how it works. And this is how I upload homework. And then this, the school is saying, and this, parent, is how you check that homework was uploaded. It becomes this wonderful shared activity where there's laughing and there's some oopses. And instead of the whole technological thing becoming scary because everyone feels like they're alone in it, it becomes something that you share. The learning curve becomes the bonding experience. And now remember, while we may never have to all go to remote learning again, although now they're using snow days for remote learning, which I don't think is fair. I think we should be able to play in the snow on a snow day anyways. When that does happen, this rule can apply to anything. Any major change that's being introduced into the diocese or into the school that requires a learning curve, whether it's technical or something else, a procedure or a policy. You can educate the parents, you can educate the students, but it's always nice to have some sort of family event where they're educated together and you share in the learning curve together. Additionally, And again, other situations may come up, and this is about crisis management. And I'll give you a little crisis management sort of tips. Should something come up again, COVID related or otherwise, and you want to maintain consistent communication with parents, communication and messaging vigilance, whatever the school's message is on a certain situation, whatever the party line is, make sure that everyone at the school who works at the school knows the verbiage and knows the messaging specifically. That means not just teachers, it means teachers, media center specialists, the gardener, the guy, the maintenance engineers, anyone who works at the school, the bus drivers. Why? Because if there really is a crisis or something really is going on and parents are getting anxious and they want more information, or even the media is getting concerned, you never know who someone's going to ask. A parent might run into the janitor at the bakery on Saturday. And if the janitor has a very different answer to this question than, let's say, the principal wants communicated, that's where the social media problems start to blow up. So make sure that whatever the situation is, once the school determines what its message is about this situation, that everyone connected or who works at that school is given an email with, if somebody asks you, this is the verbiage, this is how you respond, this is what you say. And that should be updated regularly with any changes. Also, when you are communicating with parents, make sure it's consistent. If you're sending an email once a week, make it the same day every week. Consistency, ritual. You know how we talk about students, that students need ritual, that kids need boundaries? When a parent is afraid, everybody, they become like a student in terms of their emotional state. So they need ritual too. They need routine too. So make sure that the communications are specific at the same time every week and that they're positive. You want to always position emails, or if you use text messaging to get out mass, messages to parents, or if you use, the phone thing where they get like, recorded phone calls, whatever method you use to disseminate important, timely information, make sure that it is articulated, presented from a positive perspective about what we are doing and what we can do, not just what's wrong and what we can't do. We want to communicate with parents from the perspective of not why something can't be done, but how it can be done. Whenever you can position that way, it reinforces confidence, because what you don't want is for parents to lose confidence or faith in the school. And lastly, talking about this in answer to your question, Andrea, principals, teachers, superintendents, counselors, you are human. You are human. You are human, okay? None of us is perfect. And we have to be comfortable in our vulnerability when a crisis is unfolding. Meaning, if you're having a bad day and you're on edge, you can say to a parent, listen, this has been a really long day, so if I'm on edge, please be patient. Lead with truth and compassion. And that is my greatest message for the whole COVID unfolding. And what I've told, so many dioceses and schools is that at the end of the day, no matter what the circumstances with COVID, whether you're trying to figure out the socially distanced classroom, whether you're trying to deal with a teacher who's freaking out because she can't teach in a hybrid classroom and she's stressed and she's taking it out on the students and the parents are complaining about the bullying teacher and it's blowing up all over social media, whatever the situation is, I want you to stop, breathe. I want you to process, and I want you to ask yourself this question. What do I want, whatever I say or do next, to accomplish? What do I want, whatever I say or do next in this situation, to accomplish specifically? And then work backwards from there. And ask yourself, when I look back on this moment, years from now, How will I wish I would have handled it? Those two questions will help you navigate with such grace and purity and lead with truth and compassion. That means tell the truth, but tell it through a compassionate lens. And the best way to communicate the truth with compassion is to first see that truth through the most compassionate lens possible yourself. Ask yourself, what is my truth? What is the most compassionate way that I can view that truth? What is the most compassionate lens through which I can interpret and see that truth? And then once you see it that way, communicating it with compassion will come naturally.
Well, that is a fantastic place to end. I know we could talk for a long time, Jody, but I also know that you're going to be with us again tomorrow. You have another session coming up. So if you'd like to hear more from Jody, please tune in. Also, Jody, as she mentioned, works with schools all around the country, both in person and virtually. So if you're interested in contacting her, please do that. You can find her on Twitter at Real Jody Blanco, or of course in the People tab in your expo here. You can click on her and schedule an appointment to talk with her. She's going to be hanging around and checking in, and we're just so honored to have you. You are always just a favorite speaker, no matter where you are. So thank you for sharing your time and talents with us. And the next thing we have on the agenda, and coming up in 4 minutes, is speed networking. So those of you who are going to stay on for that, that's a lot of fun. You're going to be put in a carousel type round table. So you're going to be on screen like Jody and I are, just two people. You're going to have 3 minutes to talk, connect, where you're from, whatever you want to talk about, what you learned today, and then it's going to rotate you to the next person. So you're going to get to meet a lot of different people in 3-minute increments. So please check in on the Goose Chase game if you haven't already. There are big prizes and exciting offerings from our sponsors. Please make sure you visit the expo hall tomorrow. There are a lot of giveaways and prizes and exciting extra content going on in the afternoon. So with that, have fun networking, enjoy your Friday night, and we will see you all tomorrow. God bless.
Yes, and we experienced sunset together because I realized I went dark, but you could still see my eyes, right? I don't look like a ghoul, but yes, we experienced the sunset together.
Thank you all. See you in speed networking in a few minutes.
Bye.